This is Alan Karpick, Saturday Simulcast with Brian Neubert, Tom Dienhart, and a lot to talk about from this past week. A lot that went on Thursday night, and we'll hit that with the Purdue's George Karlaftis getting drafted in the first round. We'll hit a little bit of basketball as well, roster moves. We might even get to that thing called NIL, though. I don't know how much more we could talk about that, but that's obviously a topic that is everybody's talking about. I want to thank our sponsor, the Union Club Hotel, the 811 restaurant, the Boiler Up Bar, and all of that the Purdue Union Club does for us. We appreciate them as well. Tom, I'll start with you. And the news came just before midnight last night Eastern time, and that George Karlaftis gets drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll be very honest, when he went down to the last 4 or 5 picks, I said, gosh, he's not going to make it. And yet he did. And good for George and good for Purdue football, I would think. But put that a little bit into perspective in terms of what that really means. It's kind of a new happening. First round draft pick in 11 years. So it doesn't happen every day for Purdue football.
Yeah, you're right. 2011, of course, Ryan Kerrigan, the 16th overall pick that year to the then Washington Redskins. So it's been a while. And obviously, the benefits to any program to having a first-round pick are numerous, especially for a program like Purdue that's still sort of trying to climb that slope of relevancy under Jeff Brom. They are making progress, guys. And this, I was thinking last night, just kind of another feather in the cap of Jeff Brom's era. You know, we had the 9-win season last year, the first since, what was it, 2003, I believe. Had 3 bowl games in 5 years, a couple bowl wins. You've had some highly ranked recruiting classes, all-American players as well at receiver and defensive end. Now you have a first-round draft choice. So you're sort of checking the boxes of all the things you like to see of a program that is, again, like I think trending the right way. And boy, you guys know George Karlaftis too. And how can you not root for a guy like George? I mean, just as a person and the work ethic, everything he embodies. Brian really got a up close look at George back in high school, and he could speak to George back then, even having that laser focus. I remember being with Brian January or February of 2019 at Bruno's. The Karlaftis family had sort of a little shindig there, and for George signing with Purdue, and Chike O'Keefer was there, and everybody was down there, and that was sort of the first step, officially as a Boilermaker. And again, this was a guy, Brian said it too, that when he came to Purdue, like Rondale Moore, there was a plan, 3 years and out. And George, to have that type of focus as an 18-year-old, to follow through with that work ethic and that discipline, just tells you all you need to know. The Chiefs know what they're going to get with George Karlaftis. You can't say that about a lot of people in life. Every day, you know what you're going to get from George Karlaftis. He may not be J.J. Watt, but I think he's going to be a very solid and productive pro. And guys, he gets to start off his career with a very stable franchise and a very successful franchise. Better in Kansas City than in Jacksonville or Detroit or Brian, even with the Jets, I'm sorry to say.
Oh, but those Jets.
They had a hell of a night last night.
Had a monster night.
We'll see.
No, I think I was going to say one thing about George. You know, I think even Brian can remember this too when we had him as a senior in high school on our live show. He's grown up. I mean, I thought he really handled himself well. We've seen him in a leadership role. Brian's talked about his role in recruiting and trying to bring guys with him. I thought that was a big plus for him. Brian, yeah, your thoughts on not only just the importance of having a guy like Karlaftis in a first-round draft pick, but yes, your Jets did well. Yes, you watched the pro game a little bit too. And how do you think he's going to fit in?
He'll do fine. I think, the one thing that you saw, I think the biggest thing that stood out to me about Karlaftis during his Purdue career was just how much his motor really stood out, how much his work ethic stood out, how much his professionalism stood out. I didn't know, in high school, having covered him, whether those things would be there because, he was relatively new to football. He was, a kid who things came relatively easy to him on the football field because he was such a dominant sort of player from a physical perspective. But that's what really made him, I think, what he was at Purdue. And I think that stuff obviously translates because you have to kind of restart it in the NFL. You have to start from the bottom again. And that kind of stuff really benefits players. You know, what's funny about his draft stock and David Bell's draft stock is, I shouldn't say funny, but it seems like a really rough year to have been a defensive end, pass rusher, and a wide receiver.
There's
Because
so many
watching that first round was like defensive end, wide receiver, defensive end, wide receiver. Meanwhile, every good wide receiver in the NFL has been traded here in the last 3 weeks. So there's a lot of moving parts around, around that position. It just seems like both of those guys, this was their time. But in terms of the depth at their positions of this draft, it was kind of a tough year to go because their positions were so deep.
Yeah. 15, they're saying like 15 receivers will go at least are on the board of it could be picked in the first 3 rounds. And of course, we're recording before Friday night to see whether David Bell will get picked on Friday and before the 3rd round. And Tom, maybe not. We're reading more of that that way. But, David Bell's an interesting guy. He's got everything you'd ever want. Yes, he, in terms of his work ethic, also, by all accounts, a great kid. He's performed at a high level. They talked about every player in the first round. If I remember, heard him right last night, had played multiple sports. David Bell does that well as well, or did that well, I should say. Yet, he may not be a good enough special teams guy to move up high enough into the 3rd round. Who knows? But how do you take David Bell's situation depending on, and we don't know for sure where he's going to be. We don't know at all where he's going to be, team he's going to be picked on, but hard guy to bet against in terms of having the ability to play at the next level.
Yeah. Back to Brian's observations about round 1. 5 edge rushers went off the board. 6 wide receivers went off the board last night, just in the first round alone. So the great depth there was illustrated in round 1. And again, here we go, round 2 and 3 Friday, and then the draft will finish up Saturday with rounds 4 through 7. A lot of us have draft fatigue at this point, paralysis by analysis. David Bell, guys, we all know that the storylines and the narratives as far as his draft prospects go. The 40 time, and we all know the NFL loves measurables. They love to get the stopwatch out and see a 4.3 or a 4.23. David Bell did not produce that type of a 40 time at the combine or during Purdue's pro day. Not terribly explosive as a leaper, as a broad jumper, just does not test well in shorts and a t-shirt. David Bell's the kind of guy you got to turn on the film and watch. And we watched David Bell play for 3 years. A lot of you listening have too. Impeccable route runner, tremendous hands. Alan, you talked about his character, the kind of guy you'd want your daughter to marry. Just a great person, a great citizen, humble, true humility, and big catches. Talk about the big catches in big moments. The 3rd down catches. I think back to that Illinois game in 2020. He saved Purdue's bacon that day, making that catch late to get that 1st down. And we saw the Iowa destruction he calls there. Destruction against Michigan State. The guy makes plays. So you got to get over falling in love with the measurables. The NFL does this every year. It's incredible. They're slaves to their own flawed system. And David Bell is probably going to be one of those guys who he's not going to be a number 1 receiver, but you got to believe he's going to find a niche as maybe a 3rd receiver and be a productive guy for, who knows, 5 to 7 years. And I think, again, back to being a good citizen, that's going to go a long way toward keeping him on a roster too. He's going to be a good teammate, and a smart coach is going to find a way to use him and take advantage of those skills that he has.
Ryan, you watched David Bell play all the way back to high school like you did with George Karlaftis. I mean, you saw this coming in terms of his ability. I mean, he hasn't, nothing has really changed in terms of who he is. And I understand that high school and being a 4-star and whatever he was doesn't translate to, what exactly what you're going to be in the NFL. But again, a pretty hard guy. As long as you've watched him to bet against, you got to think he's going to make somebody happy, especially if he goes in the 4th round or so.
Just always had a knack for coming up big when his team needed him. I mean, I'll go back to high school. I think they were on ESPN against Louisville Trinity.
Yeah.
He scored the game-winning touchdown with like 20 seconds to go or something like that. It was one of those catch-and-run type of plays. It was just a huge play on national television to win the game, and he just always had a knack. His teams have always won, whether it's basketball, whether it's football. In high school, obviously, he helped Purdue win a lot of games this past season, especially. Just a guy who has that kind of it factor. I always said that in high school was that he was a star. He had every quality of a star. He just needed to stay healthy at the next level. That's what I said when he was in high school. Problem, if you want to call it a problem, is the NFL loves 6'5", 4'4". He's not that. They love, if a guy's smaller, they love, elite burst and quickness. He's not that either. He's just a good all-around wide receiver who doesn't jump off the page at you from a physical perspective. And the NFL's got to start somewhere. I don't blame him, for starting with 40 times and things like that, because you got to start somewhere. You got to pare all this down somehow. True. But that's why so many guys, that's why the NFL draft is such an inexact science, is guys like that every year fall through the draft. And that's why the New England Patriots kind of are what they are, and the New York Jets are what they are, is because one drafts really well, one scouts really well, one understands personnel management, and the other one doesn't. One fritters away their draft picks, the other one maximizes them and constantly trades for more of them. It's the David Bells of the world that Bill Belichick finds and maximizes, and then when the window with the Patriots closes, he goes and finds another one. He just gets good football players, and David Bell is exactly that. It wouldn't surprise me at all if somebody gets him in the 4th or 5th round today, and he ends up being a really productive pro for somebody for for an extended period of time.
Yeah. One thing I'm interested in, both your opinion on, just as a broad stroke too, is just that 100,000 people watched that at live yesterday, supposedly a crazy number of folks. Was visiting my son in Detroit. They will be hosting the NFL draft in 2 years. I don't think they have quite the space to do what Vegas did, but just a phenomenon of what we're going through at a college level right now with some of the turmoil and the transfer portal, NIL, and all that. But then what the proverbial goose that laid the golden egg, which is the NFL, is just amazing how you put together an event, and the NFL draft has become kind of it is the sporting event, one of the 2 or 3 top sporting events in the month of April. I suppose the Masters and some other things that go on, but it's incredible that you have that type of night with all these folks watching, and you may have a little bit, not as much on Friday and Saturday. I get that, but still amazing kind of a must-see TV even if you're not a huge NFL fan. There's good reality television going on throughout the course of that first round draft.
Yeah, sort of a non-sporting event, like the NCAA tournament draw.
Yeah.
A lot of great theater. No balls are actually bounced. Obviously, the draft is very similar. This would be my old man shaking his fist at the cloud portion of the podcast. Back in the early 80s, when I was still in West Lafayette High School, Alan, in the infancy of ESPN, I would actually send away, I still have them, I'd get these NFL draft packs.
Oh, yeah.
It was sending, it had all the prospects in, you could fill in the guys' names as you went. And me and one of my buddies, Steve Woods, who lived down on Maple Street, the draft was starting on a Thursday at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
We would skip school and watch the draft, fill it in. This was when Kenneth Sim was the first pick in the draft, 81, 82, George Rogers and those guys. And see this thing evolved now. I kind of liked it when it kind of felt like you were part of something that was clandestine in somebody's basement. I don't know. There's something about it was more intimate, and it seemed more insiderly. And now it's become just a big show where they got Lowe's sponsoring the green room, and it's turned into a carnival. Like, I understand. Like I said, this is my old man shaking his fist at the cloud segment. Everybody wants to make money, and they've figured out a way to make this a spectacular event that's become must-see TV and makes them a lot of money. But, I watched those NFL shows, NFL network shows, Caught in the Draft, where they recap different years in the draft, and looking back and seeing those old clips of Pete Rozelle walking to the podium and mispronouncing guys' names. And I don't know, there's some kind of fun and intimate about those days. But there is the cool thing about the draft is, guys, the mass appeal is everybody on their couch in America thinks they can do it.
Yeah.
And they don't think they could be electrical engineers or doctors. Some people think they can be doctors, or astronauts, but everybody can be an NFL GM. And I think, but combine that with the level of craziness the fans have, and you got the recipe for a huge event.
I don't know what the heck was wrong with you as a football player. Here you got two West Side guys being drafted. This is the first, not the first Tippecanoe County guy. Of course, Dustin Keller was that in 2008. But you didn't get drafted in the NFL, but Chico O'Keefe did.
Well, West Side had Chico O'Keefe picked before Dustin Keller.
But he wasn't a first round pick.
He wasn't a first round pick. No, probably should have been.
Yeah, he was a third round pick. So yeah, impressive that George.
I'm not first round anything, Alan.
I have a couple points to make, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I used to buy Mel Kiper's books.
Yeah.
Did you?
Those like catalogs.
Yeah.
They looked like catalogs, but they had all the players, because, growing up a Jets fan, the highlight of the year is the eternal hope that springs from draft night, from draft day, whatever it was. I think it used to start on Sundays. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I was a huge draft
person.
What's the word?
Aficionado.
Part of the reason the NFL draft is as big as the NFL draft is the NFL does an extraordinary job making the NFL a year-long story. Every step along the way, from January to December, is a story. And they've done a really good job building up the draft, generating tons of media coverage in advance of the draft. And that's why it's as big a deal as it is. The NCAA, I was going to say the NCAA markets itself really well. That was the exact opposite of what I meant to say. The NFL does a really good job just marketing itself and keeping themselves in the headlines no matter what all year long. The other part of it too is this is why the one and done rule exists. From the NBA, is that it really, really helps those leagues for these players to use the college level to build their brands. And that way, when Trevor Lawrence gets drafted into the NFL, everybody already knows the name Trevor Lawrence. So people are watching the draft to see Trevor Lawrence, albeit there was no drama about where he was going to get picked, things like that. When you can use the NCAA to market your players for you, that is huge for the draft. That is huge for jersey sales. That is huge for everything that goes into marketing your product. And that's something where it really is a symbiotic relationship there between college football, college basketball, and the professional ranks.
Yeah, and the clothing industry and the watch industry and everything else that was on display last night, or on Thursday night, I should say. It was very much.
That was kind of weird.
A lot of bling going on.
Apparently now companies are providing jewelry, expensive jewelry to the draftees, and then the agents are calling in favors to their ScoopBot reporters, who then tweet out the photos as favors to the agents. That was really weird.
You know what? My last old man shaking his fist to clouds rant. Enough with the Roger Goodell bear hugs. He's almost like
that does get uncomfortable.
Give the guy a damn handshake, man.
Yeah.
And then they show that they flash to the draft rooms. Pat Forty had a tweet about it last night. All the guys stand up like Apollo. They just landed a rocket on the moon or something. It's just,
But
it's crazy, but
And it is part of what sells it. I mean,
come
it
on with
does.
the bear hug thing, man. Jeez.
Bear hug thing is a bit much, but I don't mind the green. I wanted to be invited to the green room thing, and of course, the Karloftis didn't get shown until he got picked, and I knew he was
four
in
guys
there.
left in there. About
Yeah,
four guys,
and three guys didn't get picked, right?
Malik Willis was one of them. Matt Corral was another, I know. And you have three options. I was told you can leave, not come back. They can set something up for you at the hotel, or you can come back and take part in it the next day. So you hope that's not you. There'll be some guys we'll see Friday who hung out. Maybe Matt Corral and Malik Willis will hang out. But hey, real quick sidebar too. I was told Karloftis, they really thought there was a shot he was going to go to the Cardinals. I think they made a trade late, right before George was picked, and George would, I think,
they traded their first rounder. Yeah.
Yeah, they would love to go on the Cardinals with Rondale Moore, who's a good buddy. And the other two teams I was told that were really in a lot of conversations were the Jets and the Eagles. And of course, the Chiefs had a lot of conversations. I got the chance to talk to Jeff Brom Thursday night, and he said he had some long conversations with Andy Reid. Mark Hagan said he talked to Joe Cullen, the defensive line coach with the Chiefs. So no big shock there, right? There's a lot of dialogue that goes on between prospects and these teams. But in measuring the extent and the length and depths of dialogue, those were the teams that seemed to at least outwardly show the most interest in George before he was actually picked last night, 30th.
Yeah. Ryan, you had something else? Go ahead.
Yeah. What's the more awkward optic, the Roger Goodell bro hug or David Stern back in the day looking up at the Dikembe Mutombo while he's shaking his hand? Because David Stern was like 5'3" and Dikembe Mutombo was like 7'2".
David Stern was brilliant. Yeah, he was brilliant.
That's what the NCAA needs right now. They need their David Stern.
Yeah, no doubt.
You
can make all you're right, and you're not saying that, but David Stern was so far ahead of his time and saw that stuff. And certainly Pete Rozelle, same way. I mean, you have to give those guys credit for having the vision to see how all this stuff played out, and it has for both leagues in a big way. I'm going to make the decision. This is an NIL free. We'll talk more about that next week. But Brian, you've got another big weekend of watching basketball, and had a good look at Drayvon Gibbs Lawhorn, and tell me what and you've already got his initials set to go, but. You were obviously very impressed with him last week, and tell us a little bit what you're going to be watching this weekend in Fort Wayne.
Yeah, he was great last weekend. It was his first weekend with his new team, Indy Heat, and they won all four of their EYBL games. Looked good doing it. He averaged like 21 a game. I think he might have led the whole thing in scoring last weekend. He's just a guy who can, he's not like elite quick. He's not necessarily big. He's not necessarily strong. He's not necessarily a pure shooter per se, but he just can score. I mean, he's got that kind of it factor as a scorer where he knows what he's doing. He knows how to create space for himself. He knows how to finish through traffic. He knows how to get to the basket. He knows how to break down defenses. He just got it. And that's exactly what Purdue needs, because I think when you look at what Carson Edwards and Jaden Ivey the last few years have meant to Purdue in terms of their ability to consume gravity around them from an offensive perspective, to constantly reshape defenses with their presence, I think he's got kind of that skill set to him. And I think he's a guy that he comes in right away, and he's a impact player for him when they get him here in 2023. This weekend, I'm going up to the Hensley Memorial Run and Slam up in Fort Wayne, as I have every year for like the last 30, 40, 50, 60. And Drayvon Gibbs Lawhorn will be up there. Xavier Booker, Purdue's other 2023 target, will be up there. A bunch of underclassmen will be up there. So lots going on.
Yeah, I'm glad that you pronounce it so I don't pronounce it wrong. And Drayvon is that's a glad to know that, so I don't mess that up for the next several years. Tom, obviously, with respect to the rest of the draft, which will be this weekend and on Saturday, all the last Xander Horvath and I'm down the line. Anybody else that I mean, I guess it's anybody's guess. We have stuff ready for all of them, but still probably relatively long shots. Those guys get picked, at least from your ability to look at this from that standpoint.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. After David Bell, it seems like the most likely, or if there isn't a most likely Boilermaker to be picked, would be Xander Horvath, the running back. Could be a good utility player for somebody, a special teams demon, if you will. Come in and catch some passes on third downs. Could block a little bit in short yardage, even carry the ball, guys. A little cut above of your traditional fullback, I think. So he would be the one other third Boilermaker, I think, with a shot. Again, a long shot. Maybe he sneaks in the 7th round. And then you're talking about Jalen Alexander, the linebacker who led Purdue in tackles last year. Probably a free agent, I would think. At that point, I don't think Diedrich Mackey's going to get picked. The cornerback. I guess the other intriguing guy is DeMarcus Mitchell. If you saw that guy at Pro Day, your jaw would hit the floor. I mean, he looks like he was gifted from the football gods from a physique standpoint. Just tested okay, I'll be honest with you. Didn't run a 40-yard dash at the Pro Day, which I'm told did not please the pro scouts who were there from 30 teams. Didn't even have an extraordinary number of bench press reps. But he flashes, and he's got the skills, guys. And at the Music City Bowl, Alan, you were there. That was probably his best game as a Boilermaker.
Yep.
He was all over the field that day. And again, this takes one team to fall in love with you. The New England Patriots came and worked him out specifically by themselves before Purdue's Pro Day in March. So there you go. They were kicking the tires. So that's the other guy, I think, outside of Horvath with maybe a chance to get picked. Tyler Witt, the guard, probably a camp guy. And then, of course, one of our favorites, Jackson Anthrop, the local wide receiver for Central Catholic, probably a camp guy. So Horvath and DeMarcus Mitchell will be the two guys I'd keep on your radar outside of whenever David Bell gets picked here.
All right. Brian, we'll let you, we'll look forward to reading your stuff over the weekend. And obviously we'll have NFL draft coverage as it pertains to Purdue here over the weekend as well. So I want to thank our sponsor, the Union Club Hotel and the 811 Bistro and Boiler Up Bar. We appreciate all that they do. And we'll be back next week. Maybe we'll talk some NIL. Brian will have a whole host of clarity of where this is all going. We're going to think about that all week.
I'm trying to bait John Ruiz into a Twitter spat.
Yeah, you may be able to get that done. There's time is on your side. So, all right, guys.
If you do that, Brian, you're going to find yourself working in Miami for him.
Yeah. That'd be all right.
Give me $400,000 a year for 2 years. Sign me up.
You have the family packed for Coral Gables, buddy.
Oh, my mercy. Yeah, it's the end of the world as we know it, but it is the world we're living in. All right, guys, have a great rest of the weekend, and we will look forward for more of the same for next weekend, the first week of May. Hard to believe we're up to that, and we'll be doing that next week on our Saturday Simulcast. Have a great week, everybody, and thanks for watching and listening.